Welcome to the Scrum Sessions podcast. Here in Dallas, I am Q.
And I'm Gary straight from Berlin. Hey, everybody.
Yeah, guys, and this time we go back to recording remotely, but we promise we'll do more in person soon, very soon, okay? So, my friend, what should we talk about today?
Well, you mentioned the retros before. I think that's a good topic because there's always a lot of questions by Scrum Masters on the topic of retros.
Okay, yeah, I really want to talk about retros. That has been one of my hot topics, And the reason it's a hot topic for me is, honestly, it doesn't matter what you do. If you do not have a very effective retrospective, your Scrum, let me tell you, it's broke. It's severely broke if you don't do retrospectives the proper way.
Yeah, so I think you mentioned two things there. Actually, well, first, people need to have their retros, right? Because a lot of teams just forgo it, right? They're tired at the end of the sprint. They don't want to do it. And so they don't do retros at all. And if you don't do that, you're not actually inspecting and adapting the process of how you work together in the team, right? And then the second thing that you're alluding to is the fact that, actually a lot of teams, that while they might actually do the retros, they're not doing them very well. What do you mean exactly by not doing them well? Like, what is it that you see teams doing wrong in the retros?
Well, I think going back to your 2 points, right? One is the need to have a retrospective, right? And I think people sometimes, especially if they're novice teams, they don't see the value of doing that. It's this, oh my God, we have to do this retro thing. We are tired and we don't feel like doing that, and etc. I think what people are missing the point in there is, why are you tired? Because our process is not really efficient and it's the last day of the sprint and we're in panic, hair on fire and all that stuff. That's exactly why you have to have a retro, right? It's to figure out why things are not getting better for us. So that's the first point. And I think that dovetails with the second point is, people don't see the need to doing it because they're always under time constraints and etc. So anything that they can shave out of it, it's great. But then it's when you get in that, Groundhog Day loop. Next sprint is the same thing. Groundhog Day. Next sprint, the same thing. But for me, I think what happens is when you have the retrospectives and let's say you even are not going to mechanics mode. It's like, yeah, we're doing this and etc., but you're not really interested. But even if you are, what is the point of doing that retrospective if people just complain about a bunch of stuff and then nothing happens? Hey, every sprint we are desperate. The last hour of the day we're actually still doing stuff. Next sprint, we talk about that. Next sprint, we talk about that. Next sprint, we talk about that. And it never changes. So I think one is the need to have one so we can actually improve the things. The second is to actually take action on all the stuff that we discussed. Otherwise, we're just talking, and nothing ever happens. And that is the point when the retrospective doesn't become believable. It doesn't become something that people see value in doing. Ball is in your park.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think there's a couple of things that can go wrong. And the one you just described is maybe the major one, right? So they talk about stuff, but they don't do anything with what they talked about, right? So they're not creating like a Kaizen item, like an action item, and then actually resolving it. They're just there to complain, which is maybe helpful to some extent, right? So for like the psychological aspect of it. But that's not what the purpose of the retro is. The retro is there to inspect and adapt. And if you only inspect but then don't adapt, then you're only doing half the part. And then, of course, you're not getting anywhere, right? And the goal is to improve the processes, to make the work easier, to become faster, to get better at stuff, right? And so just complaining, while that might serve a purpose, is not actually what's going to get you to the end result that you're trying to achieve.
No, and we actually talk a lot about process improvement, and I am a fanatic about process improvement. I write value streams for just about everything, and I go find out bottlenecks on the value streams. But I think when you're talking retrospectives, you also should be thinking about, hey, do the tools that we have to do our job, do they actually work? Right? Or, well, that's what we always used. Yeah, but did you notice how cumbersome this whole thing is? So I think we should be looking at everything, people, process, and tools all the time. And absolutely, if you don't follow up on the stuff that you keep talking about, then it doesn't matter. It just goes downhill, right? Because it becomes, well, we talk, we never do anything about it. Why am I going to show up on this retrospective thing, right? But it's more than the process. It's actually the people involved, the tools involved in it. We have to be looking at all that stuff.
Yeah. So another thing that I often see is, and it's not one of the biggest problems, but still, like, I feel like Scrum Masters are sabotaging themselves. So they start the retro, maybe they do some kind of icebreaker, and then they identify problems. And instead of then single threading and just picking the most important item that they know want to find a possible solution for, they'll take like all 5 items that they have identified, put them there and say, hey guys, do you have any ideas on how to solve any of these, right? And this is really funny to me because this goes completely against the logic of Scrum, where you want to focus on one thing, get it done, and then focus on the next one, right? But I see it all the time. And so my advice to Scrum Masters is don't sabotage by talking about several problems at the same time during a retro. Have in the beginning a time slot where you identify what are the issues, and then have some voting, and then only take the top item, because then they'll take 2 or 3 into the next round of the retro. And then they're overwhelmed and won't get anything done. So please, please, please just take one, talk about possible solutions, vote on the solutions, make that become your Kaizen for the next sprint. And if you then still have time, you can always go back to another problem and then try to fix that as well. But don't try to solve several different problems at the same time, because it never works. I've never seen it work. And I actually see people attempting it quite often, which is always a surprise. But as I said, it never works.
Yeah, and I agree. And another thing that we have to be realistic is, okay, you have a Kaizen, you have an improvement item. It's improving the process, the people, the tools, I don't know, whatever, right? But you have to realize that like any item in the backlog, it may need to be split, right? You may not be able to do this big improvement in one sprint. You may take multiple sprints to do that. It's no different. A backlog item may need to be split in order to be accomplished. And I think people say, okay, we identified this problem. We have to fix this in the next sprint and be done. Yeah, if you can do that, great. Is that the reality? Well, it depends on the size of the thing that you are trying to fix, right? I think the important thing is to, we're going to do something, and this may take a few sprints to accomplish. Great. Just keep people up to date, okay? Like, okay, hey guys, we got 30% of that item done, still have a couple more sprints to do, like anything else, right? And not trying to do like, bang, I have the magic wand. I go there, bang, I fix that. We fix that in one sprint. Actually, it took only 1 day to fix it. Yeah. Or maybe it takes a few ones. So you have to think about improvement of whatever improvement is, that it may span multiple sprints like many items in the backlog do, and you split them, right? That's one thing that I see Scrum Masters, but how are we going to get this done in one sprint? I said, how do you do when you have a huge user story, right? You split them, right? Well, but no, nobody said that you have to get that done in one sprint. You have to improve that thing, but how long it's going to take, you guys have to figure that one out as a team, right?
Yeah. It's a good point. It's just Scrum, right? And let's not like lose track of how we work in Scrum just because we're doing the retro. All the principles still hold. And the other thing, and this is actually just a minority of people who do it, and maybe this doesn't connect to the listeners at all because they've never seen it and they're like, what is he talking about? But one thing that really drives me up the wall is when Scrum Masters try to play group therapist in the retros, right? They don't have any psychological training, and then they, but maybe they want to become a psychologist all those years ago, and then suddenly they try to like really go deep with the feelings and the emotions and the problems, and like want to talk about people's childhoods and stuff. And if you want to go to therapy, I'm all for it. It's a good thing, do it. But the retro is not the place for that. And the Scrum Master isn't trained, or even the Agile coach isn't usually trained for that, right? And even if they were, well, how about getting permission of everyone else there? Because the developers, for example, they didn't sign up for a therapy session. They just want to come to the retro and do the process improvement, right? So to those of you who this might connect to, please, if you want to do that, don't do it in the retro. You don't have permission to do that, and you're probably not qualified to do that.
Yeah, that's one topic that I mention all the time. There is a group in the Agile community that they pretend to be psychologists or psychiatrists or both, okay?
Yeah.
They are not qualified, and they are selling snake oil to everybody, okay? You can do process improvement, you can do people improvement, you can do tools improvement without pretending to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist, okay? And by the way, not all the problems in a team have to do with your childhood or with the trauma that you had when somebody stole your, red radio control car when you were 5. Let's not go there. So I actually tell people, if you think some team member is having problems that they have a certain kind of depth with things on the past or whatever psychological thing, reach out to HR, people ops, or whatever you want to call it, because they will direct a person to a professional that is qualified to do that. I'm really tired of this tendency in the Agile community of people pretending to be qualified to do things that they are not.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's a minority, and if you guys have never had any contact with it and you don't know what we're talking about, you're like, what's going on? Then be happy, because it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen, right? We have both seen it several times, and it's not a good thing, because it's ethically absolutely irresponsible. It's medically absolutely irresponsible. And yeah, don't do it. Don't get the idea that you can do it. If you want to do it, then study psychology and do the training to become a licensed therapist, and then get permission of people and so on, and then you can do it. But please, please, please don't abuse the retro for that.
Yeah, which brings on me another point, okay? There are some people, and they're also the minority, thank God they're the minority, who think the retrospective has to be this fun exercise. Let's do a different retro format all the time. Okay, I'm all for having fun. I took my teams to the shooting range, to the mini kart stuff. I took teams hiking. We did a lot of stuff. That's one thing. That's actually team building, is people having fun, people doing the stuff that they're interested in, etc. And we should do that. Now, changing the format of the retro, every single retrospective, because you think is going to get people more motivated. Wait a minute. That is probably a symptom that there is a dysfunction there, that nobody cares about it, and there may be a reason why they don't care about it, and you keep changing the format with the pretense that's going to get any better. It's not.
Yeah.
We have to go figure out is why people don't care about it. And most of the case, it's because it never solves anything, right? Which we discussed already. So we have to be very careful with this. Oh, let's do this fun retro. Again, I love team outings. I love doing stuff with my teams. But if the retro is to the point that you have to keep changing the format every time, and it doesn't get any better, you are trying to solve the wrong problem.
Yeah, and in the beginning you said it's a minority. Actually, I'm not sure if that's the case for Germany. I think if it's a minority, it's a substantial one. And I always say the same thing, right? I get it. You want to keep it fresh, and that's good. But have you talked to the team members? Because a lot of them will say, hey, this is so annoying. Every time there's a new format that I have to learn, and it's been like a 2-week sprint, right? Now I just want to get the stuff done, and I don't want to use a new tool every single time, right? And so the team members actually often don't even appreciate it. And on top, if you're the Scrum Master, how much time are you actually taking to prepare this retro? Because I don't mean to be overly harsh, but if you have the time as a Scrum Master to prepare a new retro format every sprint, which is usually not going to take 20 minutes, right? It's going to take a longer time if you've ever done it for the first time. and you remember how long it took you to do that one, or like a new format, it's usually a couple of hours. And some people spend like 2 days a sprint in that. I would actually argue that you're not probably doing the other tasks of a Scrum Master, because you shouldn't actually be having the time to prepare like a new retro format every sprint for hours on end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope it's a minority, but I'm right there with you. I am not too sure it's a minority, right?
Yeah.
Now, there is another thing in retros that's really interesting, okay? A couple years ago, I used to facilitate a retrospective for a leadership team. And we always had stuff to discuss, and it was actually very productive. Every time something got in the backlog, was followed up, we fixed it as quickly as possible, and etc., right? But there was one day, we went to do retro, and our favorite format, I call it Clint Eastwood, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And we only have good stuff. Everything was in the good column, And of course, we gave kudos to everybody. We recognized all the hard work of people trying to do things. And then somebody said, okay, Q, so we're done, right? 5 minutes, we're out of here. I said, wait a minute. Why do you want to leave? Well, because there's nothing bad that happened. We don't need to do anything. I said, really? So let me propose you one exercise. There's all this good stuff in here, right, in this column. Yeah. Let me pick up one of these items, right? This was way before COVID, so we still have the stickies, we're in person and all this stuff. I grabbed the item and said, blah, 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 blah. How can we reproduce this? Because you told me this went really well, this sprint, right? How can we reproduce this? My friend, 45 minutes of silence. They were like, didn't think about that. So one of the things I tell people about retrospectives is you don't go there just to complain. You go there to improve things. So when something goes really well, how can we reproduce it?
Yeah.
How can we make other people follow that? I mean, how can we broadcast this great idea that we just did? And people forget that.
Yeah, and also, like, if you think about any kind of athleticism, right? I was just thinking about, like, high jump. Like, if you clear the bar, you raise the bar. If you lift weights and you make the weight, you raise the weight, right? So, cool, you made it. That's very good. But the whole logic of Scrum is to always be improving, right? And so if everything went out without a hitch, good. But that's maybe also a sign that you're not moving fast enough, right? So, like, raise the standards. And for example, like what I always like to do, I like to go extreme. I say, right, so what if we were to double the velocity? What would have kept us from doing that, right? To get them thinking, to think big and to think more aggressively, because you don't want complacency. I do want to say, though, that sometimes, like from a psychological perspective, it makes sense to like do a softer retro, right? So I'm not always like going in, okay, let's get better, let's do it harder. So, for example, I remember one time one of the team members got fired, right? And instead of then like saying, oh, how do we get faster? We did like a recognition of him, and like everybody contributed what they liked about him and what was going well and so on, right? Like to have the closure. I think you can do that as well. Yeah, but in general, people are like way too lax with the retro. They don't get why it's actually important. They don't execute it properly as the Scrum Master. They don't have a result. And then they're surprised that the teams are not actually getting faster. Well, where is it supposed to be coming from? It's not going to come out of thin air, right? And we don't want it to come from people working overtime over the weekends and so on, or burning out. So it has to come somewhere, and that has to be process improvement. And if we're not using one of the main tools to get to that process improvement, well, what are we doing then?
Yeah. And I'm completely in agreement about making us soft from time to time, right? I mean, sometimes we have really good sprints, okay. Like I said, okay, how can we reproduce it? But sometimes maybe just the case, you know what? Let's understand we had a really good sprint. Let's go celebrate. Let's do something fun and etc. And we'll talk about how we can reproduce that next time.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to strike a good balance, okay? Otherwise, you get obsessive, all here or all in there, right? So we have to strike a balance. But the whole point of the exercise is how can we get better at what we do? Because then we don't need overtime. We don't need people with hair on fire. We don't need emergency mode all the time. I remember my first transformation. There was one Friday. It was about, I don't know, around noonish, noontime. I'm leaving the building, and the chief product owner is leaving the building, and we're kind of walking to our cars and all that stuff. And I remember hearing this, Q, hardly anybody here in the building after lunchtime on Friday. And honestly, I don't remember when was the last time somebody actually left like 6 or even 7 at night. I said, yeah, and we have been delivering stuff on time. Everything is working okay, right? Yeah. That's my point about why you use Scrum.
Yeah. All right.
I think we're good about retros. Do you anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think I got all the pet peeves, all my pet peeves about the retro off my chest, so I'm good.
Yeah, I got so many pet peeves that one of my earbuds fell, So I am telling you, we kind of got it out of the way. Okay, guys, that's it for this episode. Remember, like us on YouTube, give us feedback, reach out to Gary and I with things that you would like us to discuss. And always remember the Scrum sessions, every first Thursday of the month. We are entering year 6. 6 years we've been doing this. Has been great. And that's it. From Dallas, I am Q.
From Berlin, I'm Gary, signing off.